Hello and welcome to World Today. I am Yera Jallo. World leaders are gathering in New York for the United Nations General Assembly's 76th session. This year's global convergence comes amid numerous global crises, among them the raging Ukraine war, the continuing climate crisis, as well as the spate of coups in parts of Africa, among a host of other issues. At a time when the world is grappling with these issues, can the world leaders find a common consensus to find solutions to some of these world's most intractable challenges? Well, joining me to find answers to that question are my usual guests, Demba Ali Jao, former Information Minister, and Ambassador Essa Bokar C, seasoned diplomat and current Deputy Chief Executive Officer of OIC Secretariat, the Gambia. Gentlemen, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Welcome. Thank you very much.
Well, firstly, what's the state of the global affairs going into this UN General Assembly convergence? Is it a divided global community? Ambassador C, let me begin with you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jallo. I think the approach one should take about these international institutions is particularly our smaller nations and the delegates that are sent is for them to understand, in fact, how did the United Nations itself came about, because that's why usually the results we gain there are nothing other than a repetition. It's more of form than substance. The form is, every year, everybody knows UNGA, everybody knows United Nations General Assembly between this time of September to this time of September. We meet there, deliver lengthy speeches, file those speeches, promulgate resolutions, and then we come back. The world continues as it is. So I think, United Nations, if you go back to history, there was this first meeting of 26 countries in 1942. And that time, those countries came together because there is what they used to call the Axis forces.
The Axis forces.
And the Axis forces is what they used to call Rome to Italy. That's the time of Mussolini and others. They have this wave. And those Axis forces were the ones who came together. Hitler and others were. That's why they call it Rome to Berlin, So because Berlin, later on after the war, that's time you have East and West Berlin and all this stuff, the KGB, the CIA. So you will know that's the Axis forces were existing at that time. And then you have now what they call the Big Four. United States, China, Russia, and United Kingdom. I can say these were the original 4 permanent members. But at that time, there was nothing like UN Security Council yet. You can see that Africans now, that's why I said let them be careful of the way they go. Because now you see United States was there, China was there, Russia was there, United Kingdom was there. So you see, but now people will see it as if Russia is the antagonistic kind of, no. But if you look at the origin of it, then Africans would understand how to position themselves in it. So I just wanted to bring that. So now we will know why we have the General Assembly, because when it's 26 countries that met, the Big Four came, 47 countries met, it expanded. Now they know that they cannot go without the world. UN did a good marketing in terms of selling its name, but it has done a bad work in terms of functionality so far.
Interesting.
Yeah.
DA.
Yes. I mean, your original question, whether the world is
kind of divided, yes.
Definitely it is. I definitely agree that. I mean, even during the so-called Cold War, I mean, even though then the world was divided between the Soviet Union and its allies, the Warsaw Pact, then the Western, US and its allies, in NATO and other things. But now, those configurations are no longer there. We don't have the Warsaw Pact anymore. We are left with NATO only. But if you look at the present, geopolitics of the world, definitely it is very, very divided. You have Russia on the one hand, and then you have maybe China, North Korea, and Iran, and others who are a bit sympathetic to the Russian cause. And they are also accusing Africa of also being sympathetic to Russia. Well, some African countries like South Africa, but definitely, there is a very, very clear division within the world today. Particularly, with the Ukraine war coming into being, we see that NATO is directly fighting Russia. That is quite obvious. It's not, they are using Ukraine as a proxy, but this is a war between NATO and Russia. That's quite obvious. So the world is definitely, this UN General Assembly, honestly, the world is very, very divided. The very fact that Putin, even if he wants to go to the UN, he cannot go, means that definitely there is a big division within the world. Yeah.
Let's still dissect the division more to better understand what we are talking about here. Why is the world so divided, particularly among leading powers?
Yes, that's why. Thank you, Alhaji. That's why I went to the origin. Sometimes these things, the reason why people are lost along the way. In fact, it's a good thing that we are discussing it. Coming back to what Honorable just said, things like the Warsaw Pact, things like the Geneva Convention, things like the Vienna Convention, all these things are indicators that there was a time that people came together for every good reason. And you see, but I think the division also began at the origin, because at that time it was more about hegemony than diplomacy, So the moment it is about hegemony, it's like you and I identify this way, the other party identifies this way, and then we create the culture of the good man and the bad man, the good guy and the bad guy. And usually, is that morally binding? I don't think so. Is it politically binding? I don't think so. Most of the time, it is because of economic interest and expansion of territory for influence. And that influence will still come back to conduct the activities towards gain. So when gain is driven by desire, I'm trying to be philosophical here, so it is no longer pure. Of course we cannot have anything pure in the geostrategic arena and all that. But when I talk about purity here, I'm talking about at least some sense of honesty and understand that what the goose wants is what the gander wants, So, but if you're blinded by only what the goose wants and you sideline the gander will tell you that I want to leave too. Yeah. So this is what I think, like you said, the world is completely not only divided but polarized. Because you look at it now, when this Ukraine war began, there was a radio program I conducted and I talked about the North Sea pipe. At that time, I was saying that now you have the alignment of China, of India, of now you can see BRICS is another navigator also. So you see, when that happens, you look at it the other way. My concern is always let Africa itself, our countries, let us stop this idea of siding with one, like Honorable said during our program. Isn't it time that we in fact talk about what is our interest in the United Nations? I could hear that they said the AU will be given a permanent seat on the World Trade Organization. But why not a permanent seat on the Security Council? So that's why I gave the people the origin. Now they would know how this UN Security Council originated. Was it for the interest of Africa? Because at that time, the interesting part of it is that at that time they were forming that United Nations to protect the interests of the Allied forces versus the Axis forces. Africa was colonized. Some of the people who attended the Acadia meeting had colonies in Africa. Africa was seen as a granary, something like a backyard. Okay, let's go and get the, that's why we still have our people, they have Remembrance Day in November in the Gambia, like our old people, they brag about it. I went to World War, I fought for the Indochina War. But you are an African fighting an Indochina war. You know, so we have to redo those things. We cannot undo history, but we can also refuse for that history to repeat itself in Africa. Because why should Africa always be the one that China is going follow them, India is going follow them, when actually 30% of the world natural resources are buried in Africa? When actually we have the best solar system, not solar system, we have the best solar energy, solar supply. If you talk about geography, if you talk about rivers, so I'm trying to be selfishly Pan-African here, that Africa should sit down. I am sure that Honorable, his mouth is itching because this is his area, he likes that. I mean, Africa should sit down and find a way how to position itself, not only on WTO, but WHO. I remember, as an ambassador, this is the fitting program for it. When I was in Washington, I covered Venezuela, Canada, Mexico, and Brazil. I was part of those invited. And the Guinean chargé d'affaires at that time, Vicente Fox, invited us to a lunch. You know why? I was invited. They paid for my ticket, they paid for my hotel, the Mexican government, because they were lobbying me for Gambia to support their candidate to be a World Health Organization director. So you see, we are very important, but the card that we have as UN member states is more about the wagon of a train. That's the unfortunate part, because most of our governments here, when it's UN, you see every office is busy. Why? Because they want to travel, they want to earn per diem. That's unfortunate.
Interesting times.
Yeah, and I like the fact that this year the president decided that he's not going. I respect him for that. I must single him out for that.
Great.
Yeah.
Dear.
Yes, I understand and I support what Ambassador C is saying. These are all geopolitical issues, and the background is given about the UN. Yes, we agree. Before 1945, we had the League of Nations. As he said, it was those Axis and all that they came together. So, all the time, up to the present time, it is they who are actually controlling the system. They are controlling the situation. Countries, important continents like Africa, for instance, still hasn't got a place in the Security Council. I think it's, we've just had, was it 2 weeks ago, when they said the G20 was meeting in India and AU has been given a permanent seat on the. I think that is far from enough. Africa needs to be on the table in every situation which is being discussed. Geopolitically, definitely it's important. It's a very important continent. And on the issue of the UN General Assembly, I agree. It's kind of a jamboree. Every September, delegations go all over the world. African delegations are super large sometimes, unnecessarily large. And the 90% of those people are not actually going to the UN, but they are going for shopping. That is the unfortunate situation. It's good. As he said, this year President Barrow is not going. And I understand also he has insisted that the delegation that is going should be very, very small. In fact, I understand he's been personally involved in getting it, reduced. Because initially I understand they had up to 40 plus or so, but he insisted that it must be reduced, downsized. And that's important. I think it's, very, very much unnecessary. This is waste of money. Sometimes these large delegations going to New. What the other countries, like the European countries and other countries, what they do is that when their head of state is going there, he or she goes with a very small delegation, and probably they would not even spend more than 2 days there. They would go the day before, the person delivers the speech. After they deliver the speech, the delegation. But in the case of Africa, they are there for a whole week. Exactly. Most of the time, all these delegates are there for a whole week. And hardly, most of them are even seen in the General Assembly sitting down. They are out doing other things, which is unfortunate. I think that issue definitely needs to be addressed. And if you also observe, every time an African leader is talking in the UN General Assembly, the hall is almost empty.
Absolutely.
That you observe that the hall is almost empty.
Absolutely.
Because the thing is, you can anticipate what they are going to say. It's all the time either talking about their own governments and singing praises of themselves or the thing, and talking about things that are of no value to the ordinary citizens of their countries or the whole world. So it's an unfortunate. I think it definitely there is a need for recalibration of some of the things that we are doing as far as the UN is concerned.
Coming back to these things, has there been such divisions among big power players like the post-Cold War global order, and has it been this apparent like today?
To a certain extent, yes. Like I always say, I mean, it's like, you see, there are two structures here. There is the invisible structure and there is the visible structure, especially when it comes to security, intelligence gathering and all that. That's why they used to call it the Cold War.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it wasn't apparent. That's why the war was cold. The war was cold. But was that war cold? I think it was minus arms, but it was not cold. It was hot.
Yeah.
Because people were being killed. So the thing is, I just want to connect a little bit of the earlier part of your question that Honorable delved on when it comes to inner side, because I speak out of experience. Luckily for some of us at an early age, we were at the UN. I served there for 2 years as when Gambia was a non-permanent member. I was there. So what he's saying is exactly the culture at the United Nations. Exactly. There is nothing like he went halfway. No, he said it. You see, when you are there, there are different places, rooms, like you have, most famous one is the Indonesian lounge.
Okay.
And that Indonesian lounge is where most African governments will book to go and have their bilaterals, negotiations, tete-a-tete. You see, so if Indonesia can have a lounge, why can't we have the AU lounge?
Exactly.
Absolutely.
Why can't you have the ECOWAS lounge,
Great
for goodness sake?
point.
Why can't you have the SADC lounge? I mean, so it is this question of like trying to be hooked onto all the trailers all the time is what African governments and African people should stop. What he's saying is true. When they come on the podium, okay, the kind of speeches they deliver, when before they arrive, these speeches are circulated by the embassies. I've done that over and over. Go to different embassies and say, my president coming to speak of this, speak of. So if you are so controversial sometimes, you see, we have this methodic, classic kind of diplomats who will always want to come and tell these presidents, no, a diplomat doesn't. I don't like that. You see, diplomacy doesn't mean hypocrisy. It means conducting a process or speaking when you are using decorum to conduct the message as a hard fact. Okay, like him or hate him, my good old friend in Depot, Yaya Jammeh. I mean, there are times that when he spoke at the UN, you may disagree with him, but those are things, when he said them at that time, I support it. Because it's just a way of, sometimes also you cannot say holistically because you don't agree with the man, everything he said was bad. No, I don't operate like that. There are things that he said at that time. So for example, today, if a president is going to the United Nations and say, okay, this year, I am President Adama Barrow. He has the right. I am going to introduce in my speech that we have to add our local languages because I am not going to speak in English anymore. Do you know that the United Nations cannot resist that?
Okay.
The Chinese president, does he speak English?
No.
The Indian president, does he speak English?
No. The Arabs.
The Japanese, do they speak English?
No.
Why can't our presidents in Africa go there and speak in Jola?
Interesting.
If the United Nations want to understand Jola, get Jola translators, and that will be an employment for our people.
Absolutely.
We have the right.
Absolutely.
But we don't ask for it.
Dear, you take.
Yeah. No, I agree with him. I think Africa definitely, we need to kind of assert ourselves in this, on the world stage. Africa is a very, very important continent, very, very significant. But it's unfortunate. I mean, look at the historical background. I mean, Africa and Asia, for instance. When we were gaining independence, most African countries, many African countries like Nigeria, like Ghana, were well above, countries like Malaysia, Korea, and all others. Economically. But just look at the situation right now. I mean, I think it's important, especially the language factor is important. If you look at those Asian countries, they are speaking their own languages.
Absolutely.
I mean, they have their languages as their official language. But in Africa, we still insist on our colonial languages. And as long as you talk in your own language, then definitely your development somehow would be retarded in one way or the other. And that is exactly what's going on in Africa. Until and unless we, develop our languages to a position that we can be able to, conduct our businesses in our own languages, then definitely we'll continue to lag behind in many aspects of the international arena.
Let's discuss this briefly. Are we ready to take up that challenge? Like, doing
look,
business in our own local language?
Yes, I think so. There are so many languages in Africa. We cannot use all of those ones. But, why can't we maybe take Swahili, for instance, and make it, an African language? Make it, teach it all over Africa so that we can be able to at least develop it to an international standard. I know we cannot develop all our languages, but, for example, in the Gambia, maybe we can take one language and then develop it eventually and start from there. Then eventually we have a continental language. For example, Swahili can be a very good candidate for that thing because Swahili, I understand, is a very small ethnic group in Tanzania, but in all that region, Tanzania,
East Africa,
all of East Africa, up to even DR Congo, I understand, they are using Swahili. And Uganda recently adopted Swahili as one of their official languages as well. So, I think it can be developed. Why not? We can definitely be able to develop it as a continental language.
But in most cases, again, Ambassador, our strong men, whenever they come up with something, let's say at the UN General Assembly, they are branded as, some of them are branded as dictators, or coming up with ideas that are not fit for purpose. For example, the likes of Yoweri Museveni, Paul Kagame, among others, whenever they come up with something that can at least sell the agenda of Africa, the Western, their Western comrades would see them as people who are not fit for purpose.
Yeah, thank you, Alajiero. You see, let me begin with this program. In Wolof, you saw a torchlight with dull batteries is better than a torchlight without any battery.
Absolutely.
You see, so when we talk about Africa, Swahili, for example, I think the nomenclature sometimes is what make people feel repulsive of it. They don't know. But if we, for example, agree that there will be major ones in every region, let's say Gambia can take 3 and say these are our major ones we speak here. Okay? The Gambians who do not speak, for example, Mandinka, Wolof, Fulani, they would not feel bad if they are told that these are the ones that will be first added on the UN. At least they feel a sense of belonging that this is a Gambian language in the first place. You need to discuss that with them, okay? You don't force it, because let's say we can say, okay, instead of saying Swahili is going to be the African official language, we can say we are going to create what we call Afrolingo. Everybody belongs to it. Every African will feel that you are an
absolutely.
This person who is coming today, like they will announce you at the UN, President Adama Barrow is coming on the podium today, and Mr. Barrow is going to speak Afrolingo das Mandinka.
That would be ours.
You see, he will come. You see, the inferiority complex of the African, particularly intellectual. Now, go online and make a mistake and speak bad English, you see.
Oh.
Everybody is going to pound on you.
See what you are saying here. Even in our small Gambia, there have been attempts long time ago to introduce our local languages in the schools. But it's resisted locally, by the parents, by the education authority, everybody. UNESCO has spent so many millions on, teaching our local language because, we understand that teaching has to start from a base. If you are taught in your mother tongue, eventually you will even make a better grade in English or whatever language you are. But it has been resisted. UN has, UNESCO has spent so many millions on that. Nobody wants to do it. Curricula has been developed, been developed, on our local languages, and pilot projects have been, but they have all failed
Exactly.
because there has been resistance. Nobody wants their children to learn in their own language.
No,
Which is unfortunate.
The thing is that, Honorable, you have landmarks and references in this country. A person like C.D. Ajata, a person like Mama Adle Sose. And when it comes to journalism, I know, particularly yourself, you understand a lot about these things. I remember when Matthew Jallo and others wrote about these things, the tango. I mean, you particularly as an individual, him sitting here, he's done a lot on those things.
Absolutely.
So you see, the whole thing is this, is the marketing strategy of the authorities, not only this government, but many governments in Africa. It's like when you are trying to introduce that, you don't need permission for it. This is curriculum. This is a school system. This is a law. If your kid comes there, we are asked to choose. Let's say you are, before you do the WAEC exam, you have to have credit in 2 Gambian languages. It's your problem now to choose which one. Honestly, not to please the cameraman, I would have definitely chosen Jola, me. Yes, because I know I can speak these other ones, but I'm interested because the only thing I can speak there is Kasumeke, Okobugo, Okunyilabo, and stuff like that. But I want to speak Sarawule, I want to speak Jola, because you know why? The more languages you speak scientifically, you will not even suffer from Alzheimer's. Let them go and do the research.
Great. Let's come back to this UN General Assembly. We've seen major absentees from the summit. Erathiti in itself to have some of the world's most powerful leaders, as we call it, skipping the summit. Vladimir Putin of Russia, of course, Emmanuel Macron of France, Rishi Sunak of the British Prime Minister, the Chinese president. I mean, all not attending the summit. Does this, diminish the importance of the summit?
No, I don't think it
we
does.
have a few minutes to go, though.
Yeah, honestly, I don't think it diminishes, because I think it becomes kind of a habit, or rather, it's an annual jamboree. This every September, the leaders go there, give speeches, and it doesn't change anything. So if they don't come, the world still remains the same. Honestly, I don't think it makes any difference whatsoever if any leader decides not to go there. It doesn't add anything or subtract anything to the geopolitics that we are currently in. Honestly, I don't think it makes a lot of difference.
Ambassador?
To a certain extent, what would I say? Within a context, yes. Because you're talking about, I started with the 4 big boys. Washington, United Kingdom, China, and Russia. Those are the origin. Before when the 26 countries met, the 47 countries met, and the UN declaration, allies versus Axis forces. Well, so if you and the one who went together, I will speak like a Fulani, and then you went together to get your cows, you give it to Jarga Demba Ali, and then all of a sudden, Esa will pull 2 cows and Yero will pull 2 cows. Sooner or later, we may not have,
absolutely.
Geostrategically, these are important countries. So for me, is it not going to be the beginning of an order, not BRICS, but UNEXIT? You remember Brexit? Let's be careful. We may hear UNEXIT. Some countries will say we are exiting the United Nations.
That would be catastrophic.
Anything is predictable in this world. And then the next thing is you will have the UNEXIT group. Now they will say, okay, we have all been converging at the United Nations, the Rockefeller Building, 2nd Avenue. So now we are going to change it now. It has to be among member states. Gambia should be happy if that is happening, because we have an international conference center. Then you never know. This world, anything can happen, because people are refusing an established conveyor belt that has been here for years. And they don't want to be identified with that. So the United States also and other countries, they should move fast and be wise about it. And instead of waiting for people to think that everybody is asked to converge in America, they should start promoting it themselves and say, okay, now why not we say next United Nations is going to be held in Addis Ababa. Then they will play the game. But it could be predicted. You can hear UNEXIT.
Ray, I mean, with the current state of polarization we are seeing, I mean, what you are predicting is possible. It can definitely happen. One fine day, probably Russia would say, okay, we've had enough of this UN system thing, because we have seen the World Bank, we have seen WHO, everybody is ganging up against Russia. So if they feel that, all these UN-affiliated agencies are definitely not helping the situation, or they are ganging up against Russia, why not? Probably they would incite their allies as well to break up, and it's all a possibility. So I think, as you said, I mean, those who are actually controlling the situation should be able to play, their cards in a much better way than they are doing presently.
Well, gentlemen, they just giving me a red card. That let me just put it like that. That the time is almost up. We thank you so much for your time on The World Today. If you want to be part of this show, you can follow us on our website, that is at www.grts.gm, on our Facebook page, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, and liking. Thank you for joining us. From me, Yero Jallow. Bye for now.